There we go. Good morning, friends. Good morning. It's very chilly morning out there. Sorry, I'm only a couple minutes late, so that's not too bad. Woohoo! Uh, that's a success. But it is chilly out there, so if you go outside, make sure you're dressing up nice and warm, because you will need it today, that's for sure. And it is Wednesday, December 9th, so I guess we need to expect that. And I'm PB. I'm Pastor Brian, pastor here at Christ UMC in Waynesboro. Love being able to say that. And you are joining me for another episode of PB Reads the Bible. And we are on episode 15 on our journey through Matthew, through the book of Matthew. I'll need to sit down and count up one of these days. I'm not sure how many books of the Bible this makes. This probably puts us close to 10 books of the Bibles that we've gone through, looked at. So I'll have to look at that. We are officially halfway done because yesterday we finished 14. So we are halfway through Matthew. Now we begin the second half, right? It's chapter 15. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So today is, did I say today's Wednesday? Today is Thursday, December 9th. I hope I didn't say Wednesday before, but I think I did. Today is Thursday, December 9th. Thursday, December 9th. So go ahead and check in. Thank you, Ron, for reminding me. Ron says present. Present and accounted for. Good to have you with me this morning, Ron. Joining live. So if you are joining live, go ahead and say something now. If you're not joining live, go ahead and say something. I'll be checking in later to see if there's anything that I need to address, because I want you to use the same thing for comments and questions. If there's something I'm not clear about in what I say, or something you have a different thought, different question that I address, please go ahead and ask it or state it. You can use the comment section of the stream. Or you can send me a text, 570-351-1619. Good stuff. Today is Thursday, so today is the last day of the week for our readings. We'll be picking back up on Monday. Doesn't mean you have to be completely disconnected from us, because there's Sunday, 8:15 and 10:45 for worship in person. 10:45 is also live stream. So if you can't be here with us in person, you can join us on the live stream at 10:45 on Facebook, YouTube, or our website, umcchrist.org. And in the afternoon on Sunday, 3 o'clock, in person only, we're going to have some people here just talking to us about estate planning. If you have questions about your future finances and what you should be doing now, go ahead and come join us. Or send me the question so I can make sure that I ask it, that they get asked if you're not here, and we'll let you know how that works out. Good morning, Maureen. Good morning, Cheryl. Hello. Yes, it is. It's a chilly day out there. Hence t-shirt and a sweater and a coat over top of that when I was outside. Brr. Should have had gloves on. My hands are always cold. I should know better. And I think that's all I have for announcements, because the following week, Sunday the 19th, of course, is worship at the regular times. Oh no, one more for this Sunday. If you're in the area, come join us at Camp Penn. Camp Penn will be having their Christmas program, candlelight Christmas program. 4 o'clock, they'll be gathering for cookies and hot chocolate and conversation in their dining hall building. And then at 5 o'clock starts their Christmas program in the chapel. And our bell ringers are going to be going up there for to perform, to present, to offer 2 pieces of music, and there'll be other songs and singing taking place. And I'm supposed to have something to say. Not exactly sure what it'll be yet. I might use my sermon from a couple weeks ago, because the theme is hope. So we might go with hope. So I hope that my folks won't be upset if they listen to the same sermon another time. But next week, the 19th, in the evening, will be our praise and worship service, and it'll be all Christmas sixth Advent songs that we'll be joining together in singing that evening. The 20th, I had mistakenly booked the Blue Christmas for Monday the 20th, but I had forgotten that we have a memorial service for actually for two people, a husband and wife who passed away within the last year. That's taking place on Monday. So our Blue Christmas will be on Tuesday the 21st, and that will be that'll be from home, so to speak. That will be online only. I'll be streaming that from the house. Good morning, John. Good morning, Marilyn. Good to have you joining us again. All right. So I know I tell you folks, keep those eyes and ears open for what's going on in your life, or what God is doing in your life and lives of those around you, and then share when you see it, when you hear it. Well, I'm going to share. I'm going to share today. We've been praying for Kurt One, and like 2 days ago and a few days before that, things did not look good, my friends. Things really did not look good, and some of the things that the doctors were telling the family didn't show much promise or much hope with what they thought what the condition was and the way things were going. And he was in ICU. Yesterday, Esther went to see him. He was like bright-eyed and recognized her and said, "Hi, hon." Actually, clearly and understandably communicative in that fashion. And they were moving him out of ICU and into rehab. So on behalf of the family, thank you for your prayers for Kurt and Esther and the family, and keep it coming. Keep it coming. Because God hears. Our God loves. Our God loves. And I believe that, yes, I know the doctors had something to do. They had a lot to do with it. But I would say that God's wisdom and God's guidance helped them to come to the right decisions and conclusions. So wonderful, wonderful. All right, 10 after 9. Let's get into the reading of the Bible, shall we? We're going to get into chapter 15. Because in parts, I don't know that we're really going to have a whole lot to say about it, because some of this is almost repetitive. I've already said things. Yes, wonderful news indeed, Cheryl. Wonderful news indeed. All right. So let's get into it. Chapter 15. Then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands before they eat." He answered them, "And why do you break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and your mother,' and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die. But you say that whoever tells father or mother, 'Whatever support you might have had from me is given to God,' then that person need not honor the father. So for the sake of your tradition, you make void the word of God. You hypocrites! Isaiah prophesied rightly about you when he said, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines.' Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, 'Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles.'" Pause. Again, we need to understand context. We need to understand context. So the first thing we're going to remember is, when did Matthew write this gospel? When did Matthew put it together? And what were the circumstances? What was taking place? Matthew wrote it probably close to 80 AD, right around 80. Some say a couple years earlier, some say a few years later. So let's just go with 80 as our number. So it's after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. He's writing to, in particular, to his faith community in Antioch, a church in Antioch. Now, this church in Antioch was Jewish and Gentile, and struggling with that, of course. as were many churches at the time. We saw that when we went through the book of Romans, the similar kind of thing. But they're also struggling with their Jewishness and disagreements that were taking place within Judaism at the time. And that's kind of what we're stepping into here. This isn't a Jewish versus Christian argument. This is a Jewish versus Jewish argument. A Jewish tradition versus Jewish tradition argument is what's taking place. We read it, and if we don't understand that, we read it and we say, oh, this is Jewish versus Christian, and it's, you know, a hypocritical sticking to the rules and stuff like that. And that's not the case. That's not the case. Let's talk about the first part of this. Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands before they eat. A couple important things in there. The tradition of the elders, that phrase, the tradition of the elders, it is not a scriptural thing. This is not one of the rules or laws in the Hebrew Bible as far as washing your hands prior to eating. There is, and we're not talking about regular cleanliness either. We're talking about a ritual cleanliness, a ritual purity, which symbolizes holiness and trying to be holy like God, which the Bible asks us to try to do, and which Jesus says we're supposed to do. You know, be holy like your Father is holy. Be perfect like your Father is perfect in love. And so one of the things that idea, the idea of clean versus unclean, spiritual purity, and that kind of stuff, holiness. The Decalogue has a lot to talk about, has a lot to say. The Hebrew Bible talks about that a lot. There's only one spot where it says anything about washing of hands and prior to eating, but it's really for the priests to wash their hands prior to sacrifices for their purity. Okay, so it seems, based on this and based on other things, that the Pharisees are trying to almost usurp this thing. Their claim is, their thought is that all of Israel, that Israel is a nation of priests. Remember, this is in 75, this is at least 75, if not 80 AD. Temple's been destroyed, so the work of the priests has stopped because they don't have the sacrifices taking place. The temple's the only place you could do them anyway. So the Pharisees are kind of taken over, and they're saying all Israel is a nation of priests, and so we would make ourselves ritually pure and clean. Wash your hands before you eat. So they're trying to, and this is becoming their tradition, and it's a tradition of the elders. Their claim is that this tradition has been around for hundreds of years, if not 1,000 years. That this tradition dates back to the Sinai covenant. It doesn't. You know, it's something that they came up with. Maybe it predates the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, but it's not something that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, like they say. But they're upset that the disciples are breaking that rule, which is only a tradition, not a rule. So what's taking place is, and Matthew is stepping into this argument. We're stepping into this argument, and he's placing Jesus against that argument. So that's what's taking place. So it's two Jewish groups having this discussion, and Jesus stepping into it, coming down on one side, we might say. Jesus never really answers the question, at least not to the Pharisees. He doesn't give the Pharisees an answer to their question, does he? He knows that their minds have already been made up about him. And Matthew is making that point, if nothing else. Matthew is making the point that they've made up their mind. Jesus is wrong no matter what. We're going to kill him. So there's no reason or no need for Jesus to try to have a debate of any substance against them. So he doesn't answer their question. Instead, he challenges them to answer a question: why do you break a commandment of God? You're so concerned about a rule from tradition from your elders that you're trying to say that that's more important than a commandment from God. So he just changed things, because I believe in Mark he says Moses gave the rule, but here it's, he's more specific. Matthew is more specific, saying God, not even Moses. Now God, you're trying to say that your traditions of your elders are more important to follow than the things that God tells you. There's not much proof anyway that what Matthew has Jesus say here is true, whether or not it was one of the traditions at the time, but we accept that it was. We accept that it was. And what's he saying? How is that a violation of the rule? Because the commandment is honor your father and mother, and whoever speaks evil of a mother or father must surely die. But especially the honoring your father and mother. But they say that the money I was going to give you to take care of you, I'm giving to the temple instead, so I don't need to do that anymore. How is that not honoring your father and mother? Well, it goes back to the best understanding of what is meant by honor. Honor doesn't mean respect your parents. Honor literally means to take care of. So they don't want to take care of their elderly parents the way they're supposed to. And so they say, well, the money I was going to use to take care of you, I'm giving to the temple instead. And the elders say that that's okay. So that's what's wrong with that. That's how they're literally violating the commandment to honor your father and mother. And Jesus turns his attention now not to his disciples, but to the crowds. Jesus has not abandoned the crowds. He still sees a chance for them. We could say that Jesus has abandoned the Pharisees. And I should have said, it says that they came from Jerusalem. They didn't come from Jerusalem. That's extremely unlikely that they actually came from Jerusalem, that the Pharisees and scribes came from Jerusalem. That would be a literary device by Matthew to point to the Passion story. He is seating the Pharisees and scribes as representatives of Jerusalem. He's seating them in Jerusalem as the point of conflict between Jesus and the religious authorities, the religious right. As he's seating that in Jerusalem as a way of being a precursor and foreshadowing Jesus's eventual trip to Jerusalem and the Passion that will take place there. They didn't actually come from Jerusalem all the way up to Galilee to talk to Jesus, to ask him this question. This would have been local representatives, but Matthew says from Jerusalem to put Jerusalem in your head, to set the stage towards the Passion. All right. But we can say that because Jesus never answered the Pharisees' question, we can say that he has abandoned them because he knows what their minds are made up. So Matthew hasn't abandoned them, but he does not abandon the crowds. Still thinks that there's a chance there for at least some of them to truly become his disciples, not just people who tag along, but to be literal disciples, because discipleship and righteousness is so important for Matthew. So he addresses them and gives them the answer to the question that the Pharisees asked. And he tells them, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it's what comes out of the mouth that defiles. Jesus isn't coming up with anything new. That is something that would have been in Judaism, an understanding in Judaism at the time. Because what comes out of the mouth is representative of the heart, of what drives you, of where your aim, your focus, your will really truly resides. So not what goes in, but what comes out. And so he's not coming up with something new, but the point is that he's telling the crowds, not the Pharisees, in hopes that some of them will become real disciples. So continuing, verse 12, then the disciples approached and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said? Pause. Now, I know I've said before that word offense, when it was used in multiple times before, it's talking about Jesus not matching up with their image of the Messiah. And maybe it still has that undertone. But here, I think we can go with the more literal understanding of the word, the other understanding of the word, that they were offended. They were bothered by what he said. They weren't tripped up by it as far as offended and scandal and all that kind of stuff. They're just mad. He stepped on their toes. He made them mad with what he said. Continuing, so verse 13, he answered, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. And if one blind person guides another, both will fall into a pit. But Peter said to them, explain this parable to us. Then he said, are you also still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles. For out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile. Pause. So that's basically what I said about what that passage too, right? It's what comes out of the heart. It's what comes out of the heart. It's not what goes in the mouth, but it's what comes out of the mouth. So those are a reflection of what's taking place in your heart. In your heart. Okay, verse 20. So we're going to continue. Verse 21. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon. Pause. Excuse me. I know I'm only a couple of verses in, but we're going to talk about this one anyway, because it's setting the stage. It's setting the stage. This is answering the question where. This is answering the question where. Jesus is on the move, and in this case, he left that place. So he left somewhere in Galilee, and he has gone to Tyre and Sidon, which are Gentile lands. They're north of the border of Israel. They're north of the border of Israel, and actually I think they're on the Mediterranean Sea. They're vacation towns. They're vacation towns, but they're Gentile, and so Matthew uses both names. I think Mark only says Tyre when he tells this story, which is still enough to let you know it's Gentile, and but Matthew wants to make it extra clear: Tyre and Sidon, and Syrophoenician or Canaanite woman, whichever way you want to say it, depending on your translation and stuff like that. She is from Syrophoenicia. She's a Canaanite. She's not Jewish. She is Gentile or pagan or something, right? Virtually the same, actually, Gentile and pagan, especially for the time. And yet she finds Jesus. Now, in Mark's story is different than this story. There's a couple details that Mark uses and Matthew doesn't. Mark wants that secret messiahship thing going on, and so he has Jesus go into a house. He's trying to remain quiet, remain secret, unnoticed. Matthew's not concerned with that. Although we could say that Matthew doesn't have him go into a house, and maybe that's because Matthew wants to push his Jesus's Jewishness, and it is another emphasis on the fact that Jews and Gentiles. A Jew wouldn't go into a Gentile house, so maybe that's why he doesn't have Jesus go into a house there. But he's not concerned about the keeping hidden. So this woman sees him, and notice what she says: "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David." These are titles that come out of the Psalms. This is a way of addressing God that comes out of the Psalms, and she is using that word Lord, which really only disciples, only people who have the faith in Jesus and belief in Jesus as a Messiah are using that term. And her daughter is tormented by a demon. Continuing, verse 23. But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. So pause. What's going on? And again, some of the important things are to notice the differences between this passage and the Mark version of the story. Because in the Mark version, Mark uses a phrase that Matthew ignores, takes out of here. Because Mark says to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. Matthew doesn't use that. Matthew says, "I came, only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Which would be like leftovers, would be after. And so Mark has that idea, first the Jews, then the Gentiles. Matthew doesn't have that. Matthew is pretty clear that Jesus's mission is to the Jews, not Jews first and then the Gentiles, to the Jews. However, the woman challenges Jesus. This is kind of the opposite of how things usually happen. Someone says something to Jesus, and then Jesus challenges them and helps correct their vision. In this case, it seems that Jesus says something, the woman challenges him and corrects his vision on something. And Jesus does use a word, throw it to the dogs. Some people mistranslate it and say that it's, puppies. It's this like little idea of puppies, cute little puppies. It's not. It's dogs, grown dogs, which is another way of saying that this is definitely involving Gentiles, because Jews didn't keep. It is a word for a family dog, for not a wild dog of Israel, but for dogs that people kept as pets. But Jews didn't do that. Gentiles did. Gentiles kept dogs, but Jews didn't. So it's one more way of saying this thing. And Jesus's statement is, to throw it to the dogs would also almost be like an afterthought, like after I fed the children, then I threw it to the dogs. She says, that's true, but even dogs are allowed to eat the crumbs, which would be happening at the same time, not first and then later, but would be happening at the same time. And Jesus says, gotcha. That's the point for this. For Mark, it was the Jew first and then the Gentile. Not for Matthew, both at the same time. And Jesus's mission was to the Jews, but when pressed, it wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't Jew then Gentile. It was, in this case, both at the same time. And Jesus, there are some big similarities between this one and the curing with the centurion's servant, including some of those titles that that the people use, and the fact that she keeps pressing is what's important in here. And Jesus says, "Great is your faith," because she keeps pressing. She keeps pressing, which is, in the Psalms, and it's in Jesus's teachings about, keep praying, keep coming to God, keep coming to God. And so she doesn't give up. And so Jesus says, "Great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. Okay, last section of chapter 15. I'm going to read the whole thing, then we'll talk about it a little bit, but really not a whole lot to talk about. After Jesus had left that place, he passed along the Sea of Galilee, and he went up the mountain where he sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the maimed, the blind, the mute, and many others. They put them at his feet, and he cured them, so that the crowd was amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed whole, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Pause. I am going to pause there. Notice the different types of healings, the different things that took place. It's kind of like that checklist that Matthew used, and he's making sure that they're all there, tying back into the prophecy from Isaiah. Even though he doesn't make reference to it here, that's probably what he's doing. He wants to make sure that, Jesus is hitting all the boxes, checking all the boxes, stepping on all the bases on his way around. Continuing. Then Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way. The disciples said to him, where are we to get enough bread in the desert to feed so great a crowd? Jesus asked them, how many loaves have you? They said 7, and a few small fish. Then, ordering the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all of them ate and were filled, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Those who had eaten were 4,000 men, besides women and children. After sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. Pause, end of chapter. So we look at this one. There's not a whole lot to say, except to ask the question, why did Matthew bother to put this one in there? He's following Mark's pattern. If you go back and read the layout in Mark has the two stories of feeding, and Mark's is a little bit more specific with location. Matthew does not indicate where this one takes place. Okay, where this one takes place. He says it's along the Sea of Galilee, but he does not indicate if it's west or east bank. So he does not indicate if it's Israel, if it's Jewish or Gentile territory. If he was being specific, he would have said, if he wanted you to know that it was Gentile or Jewish, he would have said it. He's leaving it very vague. Mark doesn't. Mark tells this story, and he has Jesus on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, which would be Gentile territory. And Mark has his first feeding story of the multitude story on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, in other words, in Israel, so to Jews. That goes with Mark's philosophy and theology of the Jew first and then the Gentile. So Mark has the feeding of the 5,000 Jews, the interlude story of the Syrophoenician woman, and the point that Mark makes there as far as the Jew first and then the Gentile, but there is the healing, and then the feeding of the multitude in the Gentile lands. That's not important for Matthew. That's not the point of the story, so get that out of your head. In fact, we're left wondering, since Matthew takes out those references, takes out that, is not concerned about Jew first and then the Gentile, why does he put it in here? Well, it probably goes back to his idea of doublets. He likes doubling things. He likes telling stories twice. In fact, or telling a story once, but having it involve 2 people rather than 1, 2 animals rather than 1. So he's got 2 stories going on. And again, he does have it. He changes it to 4,000 men besides women and children. That's his addition, based on his understanding of the Greek. And then they went to the region of Magadan. Finally, we're finding out where he's going. So we know he wasn't there, that that's not where it took place. Okay. Other than that, many of the points in this story are almost identical, duplicates. The pattern, the way things take place, it's very, very similar, if not identical, to the prior the feeding story. And so we have the same things to remember from that. That this feeding, yes, again, wilderness. So it's got those echoes to back to Israel in the wilderness and being fed by manna that you can only keep so long. You can't keep it beyond today, except if tomorrow is going to be the Sabbath. Whereas here, you've got a whole lot more that you could have and take care of. So Moses did enough to feed you, but Jesus feeds you and then some. This kind of thing. So Jesus, I neglected to say that yesterday. I was telling somebody that in texting, Matthew is again making his connections between Moses and Jesus, but definitely showing that Jesus is the superior of the two. Moses could only feed you for a day, but Jesus can go beyond that. Okay, so and again, there's those connections. Matthew's setting things up with the Eucharist. There's definitely those Eucharistic overtones, I should say. And that'll be it for today. That's it for the week. We will be back at it on Monday morning. Pay no attention to what's behind the curtain. We'll be back at this Monday morning, 9 o'clock, or a few minutes after, depending on which bus route I'm running next week. So I do pray that this has been beneficial, that you've learned something, relearned something. God has spoken to you in some way, that you found a beneficial use of your time today. As you go about your days, keep those eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to what God is doing in your life. When you see it, when you hear it, say, "Thank you, Papa." And then tell somebody about it. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed.